Those who know the right questions must reach those asking the wrong ones, and sometimes even the lost. I protect my identity because truth has a body count. Welcome to the Anarchist File. The phrase, "the obstacle is the way," trends online, as if Marcus Aurelius were an influencer with a Shopify store. You see it on mugs, slapped on gym walls, copy-pasted into captions by entrepreneurs who haven't built anything but a dopamine addiction. And yet, beneath the cringe, there's a reason people still cling to a Roman emperor, as diary entries 2,000 years later. Because our civilization is spiritually bankrupt, and men are starving for rules that actually work. You don't need another TED Talk about mindfulness. You don't need another therapy app. You don't need another Instagram coach and a rented Lamborghini telling you to grind harder. What you need is the truth, stripped bare. Life is chaos. Pain is guaranteed. And the only thing you can control is whether you meet it like a man or collapse like a victim. The ancients understood this because they didn't have the luxury of pretending otherwise. Marcus Aurelius was not manifesting abundance. He was ruling Rome during plagues and wars. Epictetus was not a life coach on YouTube. He was a crippled slave who realized that while his body could be chained, his mind could not. Seneca wasn't teaching breathing exercises for LinkedIn dads. He was staring down emperors who could have him executed at whim. Contrast that with you, the modern man. You panic when DoorDash forgets your fries. You rage tweet when your phone battery dies. You crumble when a stranger online insults you. Your ancestors crossed oceans in wooden ships. You can't cross the street without AirPods. If the ancient Stoics saw you, they would laugh. Or pity you. But here's the paradox. Men today crave meaning more than ever. They sense the void. They feel the emptiness of a life spent scrolling, consuming, apologizing, and obeying. They know deep down that something is broken, and that's why Stoicism is exploding again. Not because it's trendy, but because it offers what modernity withholds. A way to suffer without collapsing, to struggle without self-pity, to live with dignity in a world designed to strip it from you. This video is not a sermon, it's a weapon. A weapon against fragility, against weakness, against the empire of comfort that wants you soft and docile. We're going to strip Stoicism down to its core and rebuild it as an operating system for men who refuse sedation. This isn't about quoting Marcus for likes. This is about becoming dangerous again. Because when you understand Stoicism, really understand it, you stop being owned. Not by your impulses, not by the system, not by the bureaucrats or corporations or parasites who live off your obedience. You stop being a pawn in their circus. You start becoming a man who cannot be broken. And that is the most radical act you can commit in a world addicted to fragility. So let's talk about what Stoicism is, why it matters, and how you can actually live it. Not as a hashtag, but as a philosophy of fire. Because if you're tired of feeling weak, tired of being told to sit down and behave, tired of watching your generation drown in antidepressants and pornography and nihilism, then Stoicism is not just an option, it's the alternative. And once you embrace it, you'll never look at obstacles the same way again. You'll see them for what they are, the forge. And in that forge, you will be made into something the modern world fears most, a free man. Stoicism begins with a brutal truth. You control almost nothing. The weather, the economy, your boss, the mob, your health, the government, even your family. None of it is fully yours. You can influence, you can push, you can scheme, but you cannot control. And that terrifies the modern man, because he was raised on the illusion that life could be engineered like an app. He was told that if he studied hard, followed the rules, ticked the boxers, he'd get the reward. And now he's 30, in debt, forgotten by women, mocked by his culture, and he realizes the script was a scam. That's where the Stoics slap you awake. They tell you, stop crying about the things you can control and start mastering the only thing you can yourself. Epictetus, born a slave, crippled, whipped, and still unbroken, said it clean. You may fetter my leg, but not even Zeus can conquer my will. That is power. Power not built on status or privilege or approval, but on inner sovereignty. This is why the philosophy still cuts today. Because modernity sells you fragility. Everything about our culture is engineered to make you reactive, emotional, addicted, dependent. Instagram wants you outraged. Netflix wants you numbed. The news wants you afraid. Pharma wants you chemically shackled. Politicians want you desperate for their next decree. They want you weak because weak men are easy to hurt. And so the meaning crisis is not random, it's cultivated. Weaken the man, isolate him, flood him with distractions, and he will never build, never rebel, never compete. He will consume until he dies. A perfect subject of empire. That's why Stoicism is more than a philosophy. It's an act of rebellion. Because when you start mastering yourself, when you stop reacting, when you stop feeding off their circus, you stop being profitable to them. You stop being predictable. You stop being owned. The Stoics hammered 3 truths into every man worth listening to. First, Life is suffering. Modernity hates this truth. It wants you to believe life is supposed to be painless, that the right medication, the right subscription, the right tech will eliminate hardship. But suffering is not an error, it is the default. The Stoics saw clearly. Fortune will betray you, friends will die, your body will decay, enemies will plot against you, luck will evaporate. If you spend your life shocked by this, you will live like a coward. Accept it, embrace it, and suddenly you can act. Second, virtue is the only good. Not pleasure, not wealth, not fame, not comfort. Virtue. The Stoic meant by virtue, not piety, but strength, courage, justice, wisdom, discipline. The things no tyrant can take from you. The only things that remain when everything else is stripped away. You can be thrown in a cell and still have virtue. You can be bankrupted and still have virtue. You can be despised by the crowd and still have virtue. And virtue is the only currency that matters because it cannot be counterfeited by the empire. Third, obstacles are opportunities. This is the line plastered across gyms, but most don't live it. The average man sees an obstacle and shrinks. The Stoic sees an obstacle and smirks, because he knows this is the forge. The roadblock is not the end of the path. It is the path, Seneca said. Hardship introduces a man to himself. Aurelius said, fire turns what is thrown into it into flame and brightness. The obstacle doesn't stop you, it defines you. Now compare this to the modern script. The modern man believes happiness is the highest good. He believes pain is an injustice. He believes obstacles are unfair. He believes the government exists to bubble wrap his life. Corporations exist to cater to his feelings. Women exist to validate him, and the internet exists to flatter him. When reality inevitably breaks this fantasy, he collapses. He numbs himself with vice. He blames everyone but himself. And the cycle repeats. This is why the Stoic revival is dangerous. Because the moment a man embraces these truths, he stops being manageable. He stops being shocked by hardship. He stops whining when betrayed. He stops craving comfort. He stops being manipulated by fear. And once enough men live this way, the empire's chokehold breaks. Because the empire runs on fragility. And that's why, if you are listening, you are already a threat. Because you wouldn't be here if you weren't hungry for more than sedation. You wouldn't be here if you didn't already feel the emptiness of consumer life. You wouldn't be here if you didn't already suspect that the system is designed to break you. So here is the pivot. Stoicism is not self-help. It is self-rule. It is sovereignty in a world that wants you enslaved. And when you start practicing it, the transformation is visible. You walk differently. You speak differently. People can sense it that you are not frantic, not desperate, not addicted, not begging for validation. You become dangerous because you are grounded. You become magnetic because you are free. And freedom is the ultimate threat, because a man who cannot be broken cannot be owned. Picture two men. The first is the modern consumer. He wakes up late, scrolls his phone before getting out of bed, drags himself to a job he hates, eats processed slop for lunch, sneaks in porn at night, and numbs his anxiety with weed or pills. He complains about politics but never acts. He complains about women but never improves. He complains about his paycheck but never builds. His life is one long distraction. The second man lives by Stoic principles. He wakes early, trains his body, journals his thoughts. He doesn't chase comfort, he seeks challenge. He knows the world is chaos, but he meets it with composure. He builds his wealth strategically, not to flex, but to fortify his independence. He invests in himself, in his family, in his community. He doesn't escape into vice. He confronts reality. His life is not easy, but it is purposeful. Now ask yourself, which man does the system prefer? The weak, addicted consumer, or the disciplined, free builder? The answer is obvious. The empire of comfort runs on weakness. It fears the strong, and that is why every signal you receive tells you to be like the first man. Eat the junk. Watch the shows. Stay up late. Chase dopamine. Depend on pills. Outsource your beliefs to influencers. Outsource your courage to politicians. Outsource your masculinity to OnlyFans. They want you domesticated. They want you apologizing for your existence. They want you soft. Stoicism, by contrast, trains hardness, and hardness terrifies them. A man who doesn't panic when things fall apart, who doesn't crumble when insulted, who doesn't beg when resources are scarce, that man is uncontrollable. He is immune to the circus. He cannot be bribed with comfort or threatened with pain. That is the archetype of danger to a decadent regime. But Stoicism doesn't exist in isolation. On its own, it can calcify into coldness. And man is not meant to be a rock, he is meant to be a fire. That's where faith and tradition enter the picture. Faith provides transcendence. Tradition provides continuity. Stoicism provides composure. Together, they form the tripod of purpose. Faith gives you a vertical anchor. It says, you are not the center. There is a higher order. Your suffering is not meaningless. It's part of a cosmic narrative. That's why men who discover faith late in life often feel like they've been starving for years without knowing it. Because they were. You can only worship so many trivial things, sports teams, brands, politicians, before you realize none of them deserve your loyalty. Faith points you back to the eternal, the unshakable, the transcendent. Tradition gives you a horizontal anchor. It says, you are not alone. You are part of a lineage. Your ancestors faced worse, and they left you codes to survive. Discard them, and you drift. Embrace them, and you inherit resilience. That's why the destruction of tradition is always step one in cultural collapse. Once men are severed from their roots, they can be reshaped into compliant consumers. They forget what it means to belong, so they cling to manufactured identities. Stoicism bridges the two. It is the discipline that lets you carry faith and tradition without whining, without fragility. It makes you strong enough to live them out in practice, not just admire them as ideas. It says you cannot control the world, but you can control whether you betray your code. And in that control lies sovereignty. Look at how this plays out in real life. Imagine a man fired from his job, the modern script says. Spiral into self-pity. Blame capitalism. Take antidepressants. Binge Netflix. The Stoic script says, the obstacle is the way. This is the forge. Now you build something of your own. Now you sharpen yourself. Now you step into independence. The firing is not your ruin, it is your invitation. Or take betrayal by a friend. The modern script says, rage, gossip, drown yourself in distractions. The Stoic script says, you cannot control their loyalty, only your own honor. Their betrayal reveals their character. Your response reveals yours. You walk away with composure, not collapse. You turn the wound into wisdom or take loss, a death in the family. Modernity says, despair endlessly, reject reality, rage against the void. The Stoic says, death is the law of nature. You do not control its timing. You only control how you honor the one who passed and how you live in the time you still have. You turn grief into gratitude, pain into presence. These are not abstractions. They are practical, daily rebellions. Every time you refuse fragility, you strike against the empire of weakness. Every time you frame hardship as fuel, you spit in the face of the consumer script. Every time you act with composure instead of collapse, you reclaim sovereignty. And here's the paradox. The more you embrace Stoicism, the freer you become, and the more attractive you become. Because in an age of collapse, composure is magnetic. People flock to those who don't panic, who don't whine, who don't bow. Women respect them. Men want to follow them. Even enemies are forced to acknowledge them. But the goal is not approval. The goal is freedom. Because freedom is the true alternative to modern slavery. And freedom requires sovereignty over self. You cannot rule anything if you cannot rule yourself. That is the first law of power. This is why wealth, when combined with Stoicism, becomes artillery. A weak man with money is just a consumer with shinier toys. A Stoic man with money is untouchable. He does not need the state's handouts. He does not fear corporate HR. He does not beg politicians for scraps. His wealth is not a leash. It is a shield. It allows him to build parallel structures, to protect his family, to fund alternatives, to fight back. And that, ultimately, is the real battle, the building of alternatives. Because the West is collapsing under its own decadence. The universities are clown shows. The corporations are hollow shells. The government is a circus of incompetence and corruption. The culture is a sewer. You cannot reform these things. You must outgrow them. You must build the replacements. Stoicism arms you for this task. Faith gives you direction. Tradition gives you foundation. Wealth gives you leverage. Combine them, and you are no longer a spectator in decline. You are an architect of renewal. This is why men are returning to the old codes. Why young men quote Aurelius instead of Marvel. Why they seek churches instead of clubs. Why they crave mentors instead of influencers. Because deep down, they know what the empire denies. That meaning is not optional. It is oxygen. And without it, civilizations choke. So here is the confrontation. Modernity offers sedation. Stoicism offers sovereignty. Modernity offers comfort. Tradition offers challenge. Modernity offers distraction. Faith offers transcendence. Modernity offers weakness. Purpose offers strength. Which one you choose will determine whether your life is a blur of dopamine hits and regret, or a story worthy of remembrance. The most dangerous lie you've ever been told is that life should be easy, that you deserve safety, that you deserve comfort, that you deserve happiness just for existing. This lie has poisoned generations. It has turned men into children, citizens into consumers, warriors into whiners, and the result is visible everywhere. Look around. The obesity, the porn addictions, the antidepressant prescriptions, the collapsing birth rates, the despair etched into the faces of young men who should be brimming with fire. You live in a civilization with more material abundance than Rome could dream of, and yet you feel hollow. because meaning has been stripped out and replaced with convenience. The ruling order didn't stumble into this. They engineered it. They know exactly what they're doing. A docile, fragile population is easy to milk. Keep them chasing dopamine. Keep them medicated. Keep them distracted. Keep them weak. And then they will never rebel, never build, never resist. But here's the paradox they can solve. The very emptiness they created is also the opportunity. Because emptiness demands to be filled, and those who refuse sedation will fill it with strength, with sovereignty, with faith, with tradition. Those men will not collapse. They will rise. The path is not complicated. It is hard, but not complicated. 4 pillars. Stoicism, faith, tradition, wealth. Stoicism gives you composure. It arms you against panic, against fragility, against collapse. It trains you to see obstacles not as tragedies, but as trials, as fuel for growth. It makes you unbreakable, which is the one trait the modern world fears most. Faith gives you transcendence. It rescues you from the void. It reminds you that you are part of a higher story, that your suffering is not random, that your life matters beyond your own fleeting pleasure. A man with faith cannot be owned by men, because he already belongs to something higher. Tradition gives you continuity. It roots you in the wisdom of your ancestors, in codes that kept bloodlines alive through harsher trials than ours. It says you are not alone. You are part of a lineage. You are accountable to the dead and responsible to the unborn. And that accountability gives meaning that no consumer product ever could. Wealth gives you leverage. Not wealth as consumer bling, but wealth as artillery. Wealth as independence from their system. Wealth has the power to build alternatives, to say no to the empire of mediocrity, to fund families, communities, and movements that outlast you. A poor man with values can be a martyr. A wealthy man with values can be a founder of dynasties. These 4 together form the fortress. They cannot be purchased in a store. They cannot be outsourced to an app. They cannot be handed to you by the state. They must be built by you, in discipline, in defiance. But once built, they cannot be taken. Not by governments, not by mobs, not by fate. And this is the choice every man faces now. To keep living as a consumer, sedated, apologetic, owned, or to seize sovereignty. To embrace hardship, to live with discipline, to build families and fortunes and legacies. To live like your ancestors are watching and your descendants will depend on you. Because they are, and they will. The West is collapsing under its own decadence. You can join it in its grave, or you can stand apart and become one of the few who will rebuild from the ashes. The empire of weakness wants you tame. Be untamable. The empire of comfort wants you docile. Be dangerous. The empire of mediocrity wants you forgotten. Be unforgettable. It is not a call to despair, it is a call to rebellion. Not rebellion with slogans and Molotov cocktails, but rebellion with lives lived differently. Lives of sovereignty, of strength, of faith, of tradition. Lives that spit in the face of fragility. Lives that remind the world what it means to be a man. History does not remember the consumers, it remembers the builders. It remembers those who refused sedation and reclaimed meaning. It remembers the men who said no when everyone else bowed. Be that man, build that life. Because the meaning crisis is not the end, it is the beginning. Take it. The story isn't over. This was the Anarchist File.